I'm Shivani Gupta and welcome to the Ask Shivani podcast. I believe that one of the best presents that you can give yourself is time to be able to sit down and ask yourself some questions. I believe that the quality of the questions that you ask yourself will determine the quality of your life. Hi everyone and welcome to the Ask Shivani podcast. I am really delighted to have Lisa Mulligan today, who is the Head of Diversity and Inclusion at Worley, which is a global engineering and project management company. She is very passionate about issues around diversity, equity and inclusion, and she's also the host of the very popular podcast, A Dog Called Diversity, which we will find out a little bit more about her. In her last 20 years of experience in HR and organisational development and diversity and inclusion, she has worked in global companies. She's also worked across retail and distribution, insurance, engineering services, and the list goes on. Her real passion and focus is in developing people, and particularly leaders in organisations, to help them create effective organisational cultures. She's got qualifications in applied sciences business, a master's in organisational coaching from Sydney University. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you so much, Shivani. That was a massive mouthful.
Wow, I think I cut out 3 paragraphs there. You have achieved a lot in the last 20 years. I wanted to at least give the listeners and the audience a little bit about you. Now, one of the first things I always want to know, Lisa, is, there's this thing that we always talk about journey, but journeys are never linear. So I wanted to find out kind of your big highs and some of your big lows that have got you to where you have today. Tell me a little bit about that.
Sure. So I might go back a little bit. It probably took me a little while to work out that I wanted to work in human resources and with people, and I guess generally making organisations better. And I started down that path living in Brisbane, and then I moved to Sydney very early in my career for 2 reasons. One, to follow a man, as is often the case, who is now my husband. And the second was to really be able to work for some bigger organisations in HR. And, at the time in Brisbane, there weren't bigger organisations established there. I think there are now. And I guess moving to Sydney, I had in my head that I wanted to work for a global business. I don't really know why, but that first role I got after moving to Sydney was definitely a global business, and it really opened my eyes to different cultures and different ways of doing things. And I've really never looked back from that. I think it was such a valuable experience. So I guess one of those first things that was really fantastic was just working for a global company and being able to travel globally. If anyone remembers what travel is. So that was really great. And, I think I lived and worked in Sydney for about 12 years before I got the opportunity to move to Singapore with my job. And, that was one of those things that I made a suggestion to the company I worked for, and it kind of came off, and I didn't think it was going to. And I had always wanted to live and work overseas, and so coming to Singapore was my first opportunity to do that. So that was a fantastic highlight. And I can remember moving here and thinking, maybe, I was now a small cog in a very big part of the world where there was lots of growth and lots of things happening, and, learned so much about how to work with different cultures and how to get the best out of them, particularly being a pretty loudmouthed Australian, which often doesn't translate in Southeast Asia. So that was a really good learning. Possibly another highlight was we also moved to the UK. So we came to Singapore for 2 years, and then I got a promotion and moved to the UK. That probably turned out to be one of the worst decisions in my career, and not really something I look back on with a lot of happiness. It was one of those things where I didn't want to go. I had this awful gut feeling about it. I can remember waking in the middle of the night and having panic attacks. But on the surface, in the broad daylight, it seemed like a great opportunity. I would get to develop my career across Europe and understand, HR and people in that part of the world. but I moved my whole family there. We packed up a 40-foot container, my husband and my 2 kids, and my mum and dad even came to live with us in the UK. They wanted to retire and they looked after our kids while we could work. And I had been there 2 months and my role was made redundant, and was stuck in a country where I couldn't then work. My husband couldn't work. And so we had to turn around within 6 months and we came back to Singapore. So, and often people say to you, oh, you learn so much from things when they go wrong, but that's the one thing I could have really done without, putting kids in schools twice in 6 months, packing up your whole life twice in 6 months. It wasn't great. But yeah, I guess coming back to Singapore has been really fantastic, and we've been back for probably 5.5 years. So yeah, I'll stop there.
That's fantastic. And I love that you've so very openly and transparently shared that, because I think sometimes, people often when we talk about journeys, we'll talk about the points that got them to there rather than the bits that didn't work. And I think it's great, Lisa, that you go, well, not sure I learned a lot out of that. It was really, really challenging time in our lives. Yeah, but it's brought you back to where you love as well. Lisa, when it comes to challenges, I'm always fascinated by people in terms of, you get personal challenges, you get kids challenges, parenting challenges, obviously big business ones as well. Even I know you've got your own really great podcast as well. So when challenges come your way, do you have a way of a mindset or a process or a system? Like, how do you address it when things come your way? Are they all different? Do you approach them in a similar way? Like, how do you go about working through that challenge to come up with a solution or even process it?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah, and I think the way that I've dealt with it in the past is just get on with it. And I grew up on a dairy farm, so up until I was about 10 years old, and I've learned more recently about that experience, and that when you run a farm, you can't be sick. You can't just say, I can't cope with this, I'm not going to do it. You have to get up and feed the animals. You have to milk the cows. You have to fix the fences, right? So part of the reason I think I've been successful in my career is that I just work really hard, and when a challenge comes along, I kind of work through it and and get on with it. And that really, you've got to get up and get out of bed and do your job. And I think many of us do that. And it wasn't until I came back from the UK back to Singapore after I'd moved our whole life there for 2 months and then lost my job. I went and spoke to someone about it because it was such an awful time. I didn't know how to process it. And, it felt like such a failure in my career. And the psychologist was like, okay, well, tell me about your upbringing. And I'm like, I don't want to go into this kind of therapy and talk about my childhood. But talking about that upbringing and that value around working hard, and even when things are tough, and maybe even when you should walk away and you should stop doing that thing, like she kind of made me realize that maybe not everything in life has to be that way. And I've certainly learned more recently with COVID that, I don't have to work all of the hours under the sun. When it first hit in Singapore, I thought I was going to lose my job. I was awake at 3 a.m. every night thinking about, I'm going to lose my job. So I was working really hard to try and show my company that I shouldn't lose my job. And, it wasn't healthy. It wasn't healthy. I mean, and I think I've dealt with lots of challenges, and some of them probably in more healthy ways than others, but I have taken that approach. I'll just get on with it. Whereas this year I've tried to not be so insane about that. So if I've had enough at work and it's 4:30 or 5 o'clock, I'm going to walk away from the computer and go do something else. So I think I've gotten better, hopefully.
Yeah, that's great. Some people have gone the other way this year And I think it's great. And I just also love the way that you sort of said, yeah, I wanted some support. Like, there was some stuff that I wasn't coping with. And I think sometimes people, particularly in all the roles that you've had in your career, people kind of think, oh, yeah, that woman, she's so got it together. And it's so good to be able to go, yes, I have got it together, but I also need some support around processing some of that.
Yeah,
So,
I'm not even sure I've got it together, but depends on the day.
depends on the day, depends on the moment in terms of
Yeah.
that. And when you look at your, not only just your career, Lisa, but also your personal life, like, do you have future aspirations in terms of, and, you know, sometimes that outlook is a year for people and sometimes it's 20 years. They go, yeah, that's what I want to do over the next few years. So what are some of the things in the future that you want to do, whether they be in business, whether they be with your podcast, whether they be with you know, yourself personally? I know we were talking about travel a little bit earlier. What are some of the things that come to your mind? You go, I really want to do that. I really want to work on that in the future.
Oh, so much. Like so much. Like I'm always writing notes. Oh, I want to do that. And I want to do that. But partly, I think, like many people, the pandemic has made me really think about what's important. I'm not sure I want to continue a corporate career. You know, I do want to possibly do something a bit different and, you know, expand the work I'm doing on my podcast, you know, and help organizations be better places to be, but maybe in a different format, maybe not working full time, maybe working 4 days, maybe, I don't know. So I'm hoping to have some time off over Christmas to really think that through. But just being able to be, I think, more creative with that stuff. And yeah, I'm not sure yet. I think I'm at sort of a turning point of like, where do I go next and what do I do? So yeah.
Yeah, great. And just exploring some of that for the future as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Pandemic's certainly doing that, isn't it? It's making people rethink their values and rethink how they want to live and who they want to live with and what they want to do. And, you know, certainly we've made some changes in our family in the last 12 months, and then we've been saying, well, okay, so how do we build upon that, or what else do we need to let go of for 2022? So we just keep cleaning stuff up as we go.
What are you doing? What's some of the changes you've done in your family?
Oh, good question. You're a good podcast person.
No, I'm really curious.
Well, last year, Scott, my husband, and I sat down and we talked about the fact that he, in his corporate, he's in HR as well, and he's been in sort of pretty big corporate roles, and he's always been on the road for 2 to 3 days a week for the last 10 years. And we have an 11-year-old and a 12-year-old, and we were talking about how the last decade sort of flown by. And we'd like to think we're a couple that actually like each other and want to spend some time together. And so we started to say, well, kind of that's not fully in alignment. We've taken these certain roles on, and I run 3 different businesses, and we've taken all of this stuff on, but we kind of haven't consciously thought about, is this how we want to live in the future? Is this what we want to really do? So we made some changes at the end of the last year where he's now taken, still in a national HR role, but has taken where it's not at the pace, but also when the world eventually returns to normal, whatever that will be. We won't go back onto planes and things at the same ferocity that we were before.
No.
So we've certainly done that. And it was also very easy as the world started to open up to fill up your diaries with social calendars and stuff, particularly at this time of year. So one of the decisions that we've made is to say, actually, it's still been a fairly challenging year. My father-in-law passed away and Scott got stuck across the border despite being fully vaccinated. So we couldn't get him home for almost 2 months. And I broke my first bone ever in my late 40s. Like, when does that happen? I've never broken a bone. And so 9 weeks in a moon boot. So we were going, yeah, look, let's just really slow it down at the end of this year. And we're going to take about a month. I'm going to take about a month off with the kids. In small business, you never get, I always say you get lots of flexibility. And I love that saying. It says you work 24/7 because you don't want to work 9 to 5. And so there's always little bits to do in your own business, but hopefully not at the same pace. So I'm going to take a better part of a month, sort of from late next week till about the 3rd week of Jan, and just, kind of just be and do little bits of travel wherever we can squeeze them in, and then just have some time to be and think about next year.
Yeah. Do you know, I'm hearing that I follow a lot of I guess, entrepreneurs on podcasts, and they're all talking about for the first time ever, we're taking like a month off, and it's just, yeah, so nice. So
It's so nice.
nice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely. Alyssa, you've worked in some pretty big jobs and you would come across lots of leadership principles and philosophies. And are there certain philosophies that really ring true to you that you try and either abide by or almost live by? Like, what are the things that are really important to you when it comes to philosophies, whether they're leadership philosophies or other philosophies?
Yeah. It's such a big question because I think leadership is one of the topics that so many people write books about and talk about. But I kind of, like, for me, it was really simple. And I certainly had to learn it coming to Asia, where people are, they want to be spoken to differently. They might have different aspirations, things that sometimes what's important to people in Indonesia or Singapore is different to what's important to people in Australia. So for me, it's about, I think the most important thing for me is being able to manage individuals, and so not treating a whole team the same, but having individual one-on-ones and really understanding that person and working with that person. Because you can't lead groups, you have to lead individuals and people. And I think we've seen much more of that during COVID, that people have to be led and connected with individually. So I think that's the most important thing for me, to get to know people. It's not a big leadership kind of strategy. It's just like we have to work with people like they're people, and we have to know what concerns them and what is important to them. So that's my thing.
Yeah. And, sometimes people go, oh, I know a lot of different entrepreneurs I'm coming across, they're like, you can't do one-on-one stuff. You've got to batch it up. I've certainly had mentors in the past, you've got to batch it up. That's how you get volume. That's how you get revenue, etc. But when I hear you speaking, it's almost the opposite. It's almost going back to that individualized approach and connecting with people at that human level. And so like, it's almost like counterintuitive though, isn't it? Because people are telling us to get more efficient, but then at the same time, you're like, that's what I really value. So do you find that difficult at times to go, wow, because I work in such a large job, I've got all these, if I want to really get to know people, that's quite time consuming at the same time. And how do you
completely? It's really inefficient to do it that way. And I think the things you can batch, they're processes and software, and that's the stuff you batch. You don't batch the people bit. And you can't manage more than a certain number of people. Like, and if you have more than 6 or 7 or 8 people that you're managing directly, like, it's too many. You cannot do it. Especially in, I guess, more knowledge-based industries. So if it's, call centers, maybe your span of control can be bigger, but you've still got, people that you need to connect with. But look, it's time consuming. And I think when I was the head of HR for Southeast Asia for Worley, and I probably had about that 6 or 7 or 8 people. Yeah, I spend a lot of time, might be a couple of hours every week with each person, just listening and learning and, trying to support them. So yeah, it's hugely time consuming, but that's leadership. It's not the standing up in front of people and doing big town halls and updating, your financial results. Of course, that's a little part of it, but that's communication. That's not leadership. Leadership is working with people, in my view.
I love that. It's almost refreshing, really, to hear it, like a leader saying, actually, I do a lot of individual listening and talking and getting to know them and guiding them and mentoring them, all the different words that might come in that 2-hour conversation that you would have with them. Yeah, awesome. And Lisa, what about your own wellness? Like, you obviously have to give a lot of yourself out, to your family, to your work, to all the different challenges that we were speaking about earlier. So do you have, whether they're daily or quarterly or yearly rituals or practices, like what are some of the things? And again, it's, not often just physical, but it might be mental or it might be psychological. And so what are some of the things around your own wellness and rituals that you do to take care of you?
Yeah, Do you know, I realized maybe 5 or 10 years ago, I was much better at planning that stuff, like sitting down and going, thinking about my physical health and my mental health and and kind of having a bit of a plan of attack for that stuff. And I've fallen out of the routine. It's not to say I don't do stuff. So when we went into the pandemic, I was training for triathlons. I was running and cycling and swimming so badly. I don't know why I picked sport that I'm so terrible at, because honestly, you do it and you feel shitty doing it because you're not good at it. There's no there's no satisfaction. I'm just shit at it, right? And I was exhausted all the time, because when you're training for triathlons, you've got to do it's like you've done triathlon training, Shivani. Like every day you've got to be doing something. It's just shit. And so then during the pandemic, I a little bit managed to keep up cycling a bit, and then I completely lost my way with that. And for the last 12 months, I've been mainly what I call lifting heavy shit. So weightlifting, but like Olympic weightlifting, not little tiny 1 kilo weights, like proper, I can back squat 100 kilos now. So like proper weightlifting. Yeah. And I love walking, and I try to every few days go for a walk, and there's some beautiful areas in Singapore which are very leafy and green, and do that kind of that Japanese concept of forest bathing, just being in nature. And I've been torturing my family actually during the whole of the pandemic. Often on a Sunday, I'll be right, everyone get their shoes on, we're going out and we're going to go walking somewhere. So a bit of that. But your question has made me think I need to get back into thinking about that a bit more. I love yoga. I haven't done that for probably 2 years. There's lots of things I've gotten out of the habit of doing, and that I need to get a handle on.
Yeah, I mean, triathlons, doesn't matter if you're doing a shitty job at it, you're still doing a triathlon. Like, I'm not a triathlon type of, I'm just listening to you going, yeah, I think, Lisa, you're underplaying the fact that if you've done a triathlon, it doesn't matter how shitty you are, you've done it. You're actually doing the 3 different types of exercise to compete in the triathlon.
Yeah. But when you do things that you just love, and you just get, like when I was living in Sydney, I'd go to the Sydney Dance Company, and they have like adult dance classes where you could go do jazz ballet, or you could do classical, or you could do modern. And I loved that because I just loved dancing. But no, I don't love triathlons. It just feels like a chore, and it feels like, when you don't improve that much when you're not great at it. So
yeah, fair enough. And Lisa, if people want to know more about you or the work that you're doing, and also about your podcast, what are some of the best places to find you?
So the best place is LinkedIn, because I write, and I put my podcast there. I am on Instagram, so you can contact me there at Lisa Mulligan, and I'm also on Facebook, but probably LinkedIn is the best spot, I would say.
That is awesome. I could probably spend another hour and a half at least talking to you, but I know I only asked you to put aside a little bit of time. I'm so grateful. Thank you for coming on today.
No problem. It was an absolute pleasure.
I'm Shivani Gupta, and you've been listening to the Ask Shivani podcast, where I got to ask some questions. Thank you so much for listening. Please follow Ask Shivani on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And if you haven't done so, please go to the Apple Podcast and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. It would mean a lot. Thank you.